A sport, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, is an actively involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. The NCAA does not recognize cheerleading as a sport, and therefore no collegiate funding for high school cheerleaders is provided. Cheerleading coaches are also not required to participate in specific safety training that could prevent serious and fatal injuries in athletes. As a cheerleader for 14 years, I can give personal stories of how physical the sport is and how easy it is to obtain these injuries during practices and in competitive atmospheres. Cheerleading meets the requirements to be considered a sport due to the rigorous amounts of physical activity required, the amount of injuries sustained, and the competitive aspect used as entertainment, and therefore should be eligible for academic scholarship funding and should require safety training for athletes and coaching staff. Cheerleading scholarships are extremely rare, and when they are given, these athletes may receive less than $500 per academic school year for their talents and athletic skills. Through further research, I found that the sport with the highest number of athletic scholarships is football, followed by basketball, soccer, track and field, and baseball. Cheerleading does not even make the list yet, and other sports like equestrian, bowling, and rifle are awarded scholarships for their athletes. This information comes from a website called scholarshipstats.com. In regard to safety in the sport, we see the highest recorded catastrophic injuries in high school and collegiate cheerleading, competitive or not. Cheerleading is considered a contact sport and sees a lot of different injuries each year. These athletes can sustain injuries on any part of their bodies because every single body part is used for this sport. I myself have sprained my wrists, nearly broken my neck, suffered back injuries, pulled muscles in different parts of my body, broken my tailbone, injured my nose, busted my lips, and received black eyes, and have acquired a lot of bruises over the years. Not only have I and many other cheerleaders gotten physical injuries, but we suffer from many lifelong joint and bone issues as well. My hips pop out of place from overstretching for years, and I suffer from lower back pain due to the amount of lifting of people much heavier than myself. My joints pop with every movement, and I often get headaches due to the amount of hits I have received to my head. A study was conducted by the Journal of Athletic Training that consisted of adolescents who have and who have not participated in sports, but who all suffer from lower back pain. The results state that adolescents with LBP, which is lower back pain, due to sports participation, received more treatment but experienced less improvement in disability than non-participants. This may indicate a worse prognosis for sports participants. This comes from Fritz and Clifford. Cheerleading is not just dangerous because of the amount of different injuries that are possible, but is instead dangerous because of the amount of catastrophic injuries that happen every year. According to the Journal of Athletic Training, cheerleading is a competitive contact sport that makes up 70.5% of all female catastrophic sports injuries in collegiate sports. This comes from Mueller. Almost 3/4 of all injuries in female collegiate sports come from competitive cheerleading. The amount of danger that is involved with this makes cheerleading a sport. Now, this may come as a surprise, but cheerleaders actually incur more in head and facial injuries than football players do, with 48% of all cheerleading accidents, injuries affecting those areas of the body. The heads and faces of football players sustain about 25.9% of total injuries. That fact comes from Perkins. I've gone through and given you justifications as to why cheerleading is a sport and why coaches need proper safety training. Now I want to give you some solutions. If the NCAA were to recognize cheerleading as a sport, more athletes would be able to receive athletic scholarships, which in turn would give more students the opportunity to attend a four-year university. Cheerleading meets the standard definition of a sport as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, as previously stated. If the NCAA officials were to evaluate cheerleading with this definition in mind, they would see the obvious proof that cheerleading is a sport and cheerleaders are in fact true athletes. Being a cheerleader requires one to be physically fit and is a very physical activity. In the sport, there are different elements that require and involve physical exertion. These elements are stunting, jumps, tumbling, and dancing. Stunting, you have 4 different positions. You have the flyer, the bases, a back spot, and an additional front spot if necessary. The flyers are the people who are in the air. Bases are the people who are on the ground holding them. The back spot is the person in the back, and front spots are people in the front. Stunting is by far the most dangerous element of cheerleading, and this is where most catastrophic injuries come from. Those who are the most at risk for injury are not the flyers, though that is what most people think. Those who get injured the most are actually our spotters, which are bases, back spots, and front spots. Lovell and Solomon say that spotters and other participants who are often in base position are at risk for being kicked in the head or knocked to the ground when a stunt is not executed as planned. This comes into play with safety training and why coaches should be trained on how to properly hold a stunt. The next element, which is the next dangerous, is tumbling. Tumbling consists of different gymnastics style flips and tricks. For example, a back handspring is the most common backwards moving trick in cheerleading. A back handspring is just where a person will jump backwards onto their hands and flip around to their feet. I have an example that I'll show you in a second. The third and fourth element are far less dangerous, although there is still room for injuries such as pulled ligaments, torn ligaments and muscles, sprains, strains, and twisted joints. These elements are jumps and dancing. Jumps is just where you jump your body off the ground, move your legs in a different angle, and dancing is pretty self-explanatory. So I'll show you this video. That was a back handspring. Safety training should be offered to all coaches and athletes in athletics, but specifically cheerleading, due to the amount of rigorous activity and skill involved. As previously mentioned, 70.5% of all female catastrophic sports injuries occur in cheerleading. I have personal experience with cheerleading injuries due to a lack of safety knowledge. I can attest to the fact that with further knowledge on how to safely stunt, tumble, and jump, a lot of my injuries would have been prevented. Cheerleading has always struggled with being included in injury reports. For example, the National Center for Catastrophic Sports Injury Research, due to the lack of sports recognition. Mueller states that cheerleading was not initially included in these injury reports until 2 collegiate cheerleaders suffered serious head injuries during the first year of data collection. Researchers in athletics do not take the sport seriously until serious injuries occur. It should not take catastrophic events and serious or fatal injuries occurring for it to earn recognition in sports injury data. Typically, safety training is not important unless serious injuries have occurred. When safety training is required by coaches, they are forced to learn the ins and the outs of the sport and to learn how to safely do things and how to do things the right way. In cheerleading specifically, the stunting aspect, back injuries can occur and can be life-threatening. There are many other life-threatening injuries that can occur. In 2010, I suffered a serious neck injury due to not being taught how to tumble safely or correctly. By implementing these changes, gaining sport recognition, and safety training being offered to coaches, cheerleading will become safer and it will earn athletes the chance to earn scholarships. Cheerleading can be competitive and is even aired on national television as a form of entertainment. This event is a perfect example of how cheerleaders can earn scholarship money and how safe teaching can be implemented and encourage cheerleaders to work harder and safer to achieve their goals. Every year, competitive cheerleading teams from all around the world gather in Orlando, Florida to compete in a competition called the Cheerleading Worlds. Worlds is where more than 120 USASF stands for United States All-Star Federation, member event producers across the U.S. and in 40 other countries around the world qualify top teams at their premier national championships to compete. I'll show you a snippet of the 2019 Cheerleading Worlds that took place in April, just to give you an idea. I'll show you just a little bit of it. And that's an ad. And now I'll show you. That's stunting. And that's their dance. Jumps. Along with some tumbling. Perfect. Okay. In conclusion, the NCAA should truly evaluate the elements of cheerleading and should recognize it as a sport to allow colleges to offer athletic funding for cheerleaders. Coaching staff should also be offered safety training and should pass on their safety skills to their athletes to better the chances for preventing injuries. Cheerleading meets the requirements to be considered a sport due to the rigorous amounts of physical activity required, the amount of injuries sustained, and the competitive aspect used as entertainment, and therefore should be eligible for academic scholarship funding and should require safety training for athletes and coaching staff. The NCAA should include cheerleading in their list of eligible sports and offer safety training so high school students who love to cheer and want to go to college but may not be able to afford it can attend the school of their dreams.